Okay, welcome back, everyone. It is the Sports Take Lunch Break. I'm your host, Andrew Corns. This week, I'm joined alongside the Holy Trinity of St. Louis sports, as I call them. I've got Dan Soshanik. Dan, how are you?
Good. Happy 4th, everybody.
Yes, happy 4th. I've also got Sean Jeffrey. Sean, how's it going today?
We're doing all right.
Okay, and then I've also got Greg Bussman, who's not quite here, but he'll be along shortly. Let's jump right into the headlines of the day. First thing we're going to start off with is the NBA playoffs. We've got 50% of our NBA finals already set with the Phoenix Suns making the finals. On the Eastern Conference side, the Milwaukee Bucks and Atlanta Hawks are playing. Bucks are up 3-2 right now in that series. Sean, I know you're kind of the basketball guy between you and Dan, so I want to go to you first. In specific, in regard to the Suns, do you think that they are the favorites in the finals regardless of who comes out of the East? And what's your overall takeaway from that series between Clippers and the Suns if you had to have a takeaway?
I'll go in order. I think absolutely the Suns are the favorite, regardless of who comes out of the East. Now, that could change potentially by degrees if either of the two big guns are back in the series after this game. They're both going to be out for Game 5. But I still think the Suns are probably the favorite either way. I think that they match up pretty equally against both of those teams. But I didn't get to see a lot of the regular season play to know a lot about the depth of a team like the Bucks or the Hawks. But when we get to that a little bit after we talk about the Suns, I think that what struck me most about the Suns' win in this series was the way that Chris Paul came back from the setback with being on the COVID list and just absolute lights out in Game 6. The Suns were disappointing in Game 5, and I think everybody kind of felt like, well, that was it was a hiccup in the road. I kind of thought the same thing, and it was kind of disappointing, but man, they really came back in Game 6. Every single player on the team seemed like they contributed, and all of the top guys played some of their best ball of the entire playoffs so far. So I was really impressed. I really like the fact that they have, it's not just CP3. There's, Cameron Payne. I saw a thing yesterday that it was the 1-year anniversary of Payne getting a chance to join the Suns after, maybe being done. He might have, his career was kind of on that teetering point. And now he's, contributing to a potential championship NBA team, which is fantastic. Chris Paul, like I said, had one of the best games in a Game 6 or Game 7 since mid-'80s, considering advanced statistics in basketball, which I don't really know that much about. I just know that he was super incredible in that game. I saw something else that said Devin Booker is already just 17 points behind Amari Stoudemire for most playoff points in a single playoffs for the Suns. It's just pretty incredible. And 28 years since the Suns were in the finals, and that well predates me knowing anything about the Suns. So I think it's going to be, like I said, either way, a pretty fun series. Whether or not they're up against Giannis, who might come back for the Bucks, or Trae Young for Atlanta. But I don't know if you want to get into the Bucks-Hawks series a little bit. I'd be interested to hear what you thought about that last Game 5. The Hawks looked lost.
Yeah, I mean, but I'll definitely get into that. I want to quickly touch upon that last series with the Clippers and Suns. As a Laker fan, I'm happy to ridicule the Clippers every day of the week. However, I do want to give them some respect because there was a lot to like about what the Clippers did this postseason. I think Paul George really redeemed himself at the end of the day. He famously last year in the bubble named himself Playoff P and didn't necessarily show up, and then people started ridiculing him and calling him Pandemic P, and there's all sorts of names and things that people have thrown at Paul George. I thought he had a good postseason, especially given Kawhi Leonard was out for a lot of that series, and Paul George kept the team in there. People are now wondering, is Kawhi Leonard going to be a Clipper next year? He's got a player option this year, so Kawhi Leonard could, in theory, become a free agent. Stephen A. Smith actually went on record and said that he thinks the Clippers might be better without Kawhi Leonard. And I think I can agree with that, because during the regular season, there was this issue where Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are both kind of 1A guys. And so when it got late in games, they didn't really know who was the closer, who should get the ball in the last play. And with Kawhi out of there, Paul George was clearly the man. He stepped up. Everyone else got in line behind him, Terrence Mann and Patrick Beverley and all the role players that they have. So I think Steve Ballmer, the owner of the Clippers, has a real interesting decision on his hands. Does he want Kawhi Leonard back necessarily? It's in Kawhi's hands. If he takes the player option, he's going to stay there no matter what. But I think the Clippers are in an interesting situation. I think they're in a good situation. Obviously, Steve Ballmer is the richest owner in the NBA right now, so they're going to spend money. They're going to be good. They're going to remain relevant. I was impressed with what the Clippers did, so I want to give them props even as a Lakers fan, and it pains me to say it. I think the Clippers did themselves well as a franchise. But the story is the Suns. Chris Paul, 36 years old, one of the 5 best point guards of all time, going to his first NBA Finals. Really cool story. I think whether or not he wins, his career's been validated, but a championship kind of elevates you in a lot of people's eyes, especially in the NBA world where one player has more of an impact. Winning a championship in a lot of people's minds puts you on a higher pedestal. So I think if Chris Paul wins, he's maybe in the conversation just behind Magic Johnson as the best point guard of all time. He's up there with Isaiah Thomas and Steph Curry and all those guys. And then Devin Booker, the kid's 24 years old. He's getting Kobe Bryant comparisons already. If he goes on and wins the championship, Devin Booker is just going to explode as a superstar. He's going to have so many opportunities to, maybe stay in Phoenix, maybe go to the Lakers, maybe, test free agency. There's a lot of opportunities. So I think Booker's having a real superstar moment. I'm with you. I think the Suns are the favorites no matter who they play. Switching over to the Eastern Conference, though, I'm very intrigued by how this series is going to go over the next 2 games potentially, because both Giannis and Trae are most likely not returning in the series. And I think on paper, if I had to pick one of the 2 teams without their superstar, I would take the Bucks. Just because if you look at the Bucks, they've got Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday. Both are all-stars, or at least all-star caliber players. My problem with Atlanta is when you take Trae Young out of the equation, he's the point guard. He dominates the ball. He kind of facilitates all their great role players, which they have a lot of. But when you take him out, they don't have a guy that can dribble the ball every possession of every game. Whereas you take Giannis out of the lineup, he's not your point guard. He's not necessarily leading every possession. Drew Holiday's still getting the ball a lot. Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez. So I actually like the makeup of Milwaukee without Giannis for a couple of games. They're not going to win the championship without him, but I think the Hawks are fundamentally in trouble without Trae Young there. I don't know if you feel the same way, Sean.
Yeah, I think I do, and I think that that Game 5 was, the proof is in the pudding. The Bucks dominated on the perimeter, isolating against guys and getting, one-on-ones that usually either ended up in easy layups or a dish for a dunk. Once that they kind of saw that they could do whatever they wanted on the outside with ball handling against the Hawks, that the Hawks big guys could do nothing in the game. I think I saw some. I won't have the exact number, but I think the Bucks outscored the Hawks in the paint like 66 to 20 something. Like it was really hugely dramatic difference. So I think without Giannis, the Bucks showed that they can play inside. Which you lose Giannis, you think, well, your inside game maybe has a hard time, but it was almost the opposite. So yeah, I think they're going to be pretty much unstoppable in Game 6, and we'll take it then. But unless Giannis is healthy again, which he won't be fully, I don't think they would stand a chance against the Suns in a series.
It kind of shows you how fragile, and this is all sports, how fragile a moment is as a team, as a player. for Giannis, this is probably his best chance so far in his career, obviously, to win a championship. You don't know what the future holds. To have this opportunity and then get injured and, maybe not have a chance to win a championship, it proves that even when things look good on paper, things can change in a moment's notice. And I feel for Milwaukee because, small town market, Giannis wants to stay there. He doesn't want to leave and go to one of the big cities. He's in a position to really win a championship. And that injury was, not something that was necessarily contact related. He just came down bad on his knee. He's in his prime. He's obviously very fit. So it just shows you how, no matter how good you think you are, you're one moment away, especially in a sport like the NBA where, Kevin Durant blows out his Achilles in the finals and the Warriors don't have an opportunity to win another championship and he ends up leaving and hasn't fully recovered. He's close, but, so many things change in a moment's notice. So I hope for Milwaukee's sake, we see Giannis get back to close to full health. And if Milwaukee makes the finals and they play the Suns, I would like to see two relatively healthy teams playing. I also want to quickly mention, before we switch over to hockey, there's something else in the NBA that made headlines this week that I want to kind of highlight. And what that is the NBA coaching hires. So Chauncey Billups was hired as the Portland Trailblazers coach this week, and Jason Kidd was hired as the Dallas Mavericks coach this week. And both of them are relatively controversial. I don't know if you follow the story, you three, but I want to quickly highlight for you. Chauncey Billups has a history of a sexual assault allegation in 1997, still got hired for the Portland job even with that. Jason Kidd has had multiple instances of domestic abuse dating back to 2001. He gets a job in the NBA. So you have these two prominent head coaches getting jobs who both have serious allegations against them. And at the same time, the NBA wants to make a point that they've got this great female assistant, Becky Hammon, out there. And they touted the fact that she was the first female to get a finalist position for the Portland job. So the NBA wants to make a big deal about, Becky was one of the two finalists for the Portland job. That's not good enough for me. The NBA likes to always say that it's leading the progressive movement, and in a lot of cases it does. But when you throw things like Chauncey Billups and Jason Kidd getting head coaching positions when they don't have the experience of Becky and the allegations out there, it just it's a slap in the face to people like me who praise the NBA for the progression that they take to then just give these jobs to these people when Becky Hammon clearly deserves the job. So if you're listening, I hope people take notice of this and she actually gets a job soon and has success because she's very deserving of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think she should have had one of those positions. I'm not sure if San Antonio is holding her in their back pocket for when Pop leaves, but I mean, I don't know why she hasn't landed one of those spots. And then not to mention, help me with the other who was the other prominent female that was up for a position
in the NBA? Or
yeah,
I don't remember.
I'm blanking on her name, but yeah, she was another qualified one that was if being a coach is anything like being a manager or a boss or anything out there, some of my best bosses have been females. So I would definitely be very attentive to a female coach.
Greg, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to weigh in really quick? Greg, I don't think we hear you, bud.
Maybe you were muted.
Yeah.
He's just talking away over there between all the Brady bunch. Can't hear a word he's saying. Okay, Greg, you jump in when you get a chance. We'll move on, but if we can ever hear you, we'll let you chime in. So, switching over to Stanley Cup Finals, Lightning and Canadiens get ready to play Game 3 tonight. The Lightning are up 2-0. Question over to all three of you guys. What do you give the Canadiens in terms of chances to actually come back in the series and win it? And let's forecast out a little bit. If the Lightning go on to win the championship, like they have a pretty good lead right now, what do you think it does for the Lightning and their legacy in this team? So first, thoughts on the Canadiens coming back, and then if the Lightning go on to win, what do you think about what it says for the Tampa Bay Lightning?
I'll take this. I still like the Habs. I still like the Canadiens. They pretty much dominated game 2. They just a squeaker here and there, and they were back in that game. So I'm still going with the Canadiens in 7. I got faith.
Your pick's still alive. So
heck yeah.
Sean, I know you have Tampa in 6. I assume you're probably not wavering from that. What do you think about the Canadiens' chances, though, to come back?
I honestly don't think that they have much of a chance at all to come back. My heart thinks it. But I like to root for the underdogs. In this case, I just think Tampa's too much, even for a guy like Carey Price. I think they've shown just more of that like killer instinct, if you will. Montreal certainly has a lot to play for, but Tampa just seems to be out there trying to prove a point. And if they do win, shows them to be, one of the powerhouse franchises of this time, this decade, maybe. I don't know. You go back to the year that they lost in the first round after winning the President's Trophy and just dominating everybody for the entire season, and then losing in the first round very unexpectedly, very disappointingly for Lightning fans. But then to come back and then win 2 championships in a row. First of all, nobody wins back-to-back championships in the NHL anymore. And second, to do it after having such a disappointing end to your season, and then to come right back, shortened, special circumstances perhaps, but I don't think anyone is going to argue that Tampa, lucked into any of this. These wins that they're putting together and these championships. This team, they have a team that's built top to bottom. No holes anywhere really. They have speed. They have power. They have one of the best defensemen in the entire NHL, and Victor Hedman, and they have the best goaltender as far as I'm concerned. You have a guy like Steven Stamkos. And then you have a guy like Braden Point, who I don't know if you want to say he's forgotten in their lineup, and you can't forget him this year because he's got goals in like 50 games in a row or something crazy. So I think they'll probably win if they give up one win more to Montreal. I'll be surprised. So.
Okay, hey, Greg, I think we've got you back.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, so before I turn to the hockey question to you, I think you wanted to weigh in on the basketball situation.
Oh, I was just agreeing with you that if you're going to portray yourself as a progressive leader of sports leagues, then you've got to, put your money where your mouth is, and you certainly can't hire, domestic abusers and people like that. But there is a fine line between allegations and being proven. I guess you gotta give somebody the benefit of the doubt till they're convicted. But I just want to say I agree with you. It's time to. I would have rather seen the. Now I'm blanking out on her name because it's putting all my Becky. I was putting all my attention into trying to figure out why my microphone wasn't working. I would have loved to seen her get a chance rather than, Jason Kidd, who, by all accounts doesn't seem like he might be that nice of a guy. So
yeah,
that's all I wanted to say.
And to your point, Chauncey Billups was never found guilty. He settled civilly out of court. This was back in college at the time. Jason Kidd, though, did plead guilty to domestic abuse against his ex-wife. So Kidd very publicly had something that he pled guilty to. Hasn't affected him getting now his 3rd head coaching job. I just don't understand it from a league that, like I said, touts itself. But yeah, so getting back to you on the hockey side of things, what chances do you think Montreal has to come back in this series? I know you had Canadiens in 7. Do you still feel like they're going to come back?
No. I was sitting here, listening to Sean break that down pretty accurately, I think, and I'm like, did I take a leave of my senses? Why would I have picked Montreal to even,
I think
win?
Dan must have gotten to you on that one.
No, my pick came in before Dan's, I think, and we hadn't talked about it, but
that's true.
Honestly, I don't know what I was thinking. Tampa Bay is just steamrolling them, and I don't see that letting up anytime soon.
So let's say Tampa goes on to win this series, as it looks like they've got a pretty good chance to. What do you think this does for the legacy of this Tampa Bay Lightning team?
I think, I don't know. It's hard to say in the present moment, but they're clearly doing things that other teams haven't been able to do in recent history, and that's win back-to-back championships and be a dominant upper echelon team even longer than that. So, I don't know. They're almost getting up to dynasty territory, I guess.
Yeah, I don't want to. Well, no, I actually do want to completely squash Dan's dreams. I wish I had a Charles Barkley guarantee button like he uses on NBA TNT, because I guarantee you when we're here next Friday, we will not be talking about this series still playing, because the Lightning will finish them off in 5, I think. That was my pick before the series. I feel just as confident. I think Tampa wins tonight. I think Montreal musters up something to save themselves down 3-0, goes back to Tampa for Game 5. They finish them off. I do think if Tampa goes on to win, though, there's a couple of things I noted down. Steven Stamkos, obviously we all know the quality of Steven Stamkos, but I think to a larger degree in the hockey community, he doesn't get the recognition he probably deserves amongst some of those captain greats. And I think a second consecutive championship would put him in the same category as guys like Jonathan Taves and, the Sidney Crosbys of the world, some of the top leaders and captains of this era. If you look at Stamkos' his record, he was the first overall pick in 2008. He won 2 Rocket Richard awards for best goal scorer. He's got the most points among any player born in the 90s right now. The Tampa Bay Lightning have never missed the playoffs in his entire 13-year career. There's no blemish on Stamkos' career other than he got injured before the 2014 Olympics and couldn't play on that Olympic team that won gold. So he probably should have a gold medal to his name. Stamkos' record and his resume is like as good as it gets in the league over the last 20 years or so. So I think Stamkos elevates his status to a lock for the Hall of Fame if it wasn't already. And then Nikita Kucherov, we all know the quality of Kucherov, but even in the context of like some of the great Russians we've seen in the NHL, he might be the best Russian we've ever seen play hockey. Just this one stat alone, he's only – I know you're saying that, Dan, but he's only the 3rd NHL player in hockey history to have 2 consecutive postseasons of 30 points or more. I'll give you a couple of guesses who the other 2 are, but they're names that for me are the 2 greatest hockey players of all time. If anyone wants to take a guess who those other 2 are, I don't think it should be too hard.
Grant Fuhr, maybe?
It's Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux, the only 2 other players. So when Kucherov's in the category,
I misunderstood the question. Sorry.
So yes, so 30-point seasons consecutively in the postseason. Gretzky, Lemieux, Kucherov. Okay, that's a ridiculous category to be in. And if he goes on to win consecutive cups, Kucherov, you remember, actually had the most points a couple of years ago by any Russian in history. I can't really make a case for a Russian out there to be better than him, other than maybe Ovechkin, who's obviously a bigger goal scorer. But for me, Kucherov kind of cements his status as an all-time great too. So I think everything favors Tampa looking like one of those dominant teams.
And I think you were saying something maybe last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, and I disagreed with you at the time, and I feel kind of silly about John Cooper and his legacy as a head coach in the NHL. He's only ever been with the Lightning. He's currently the longest tenured coach in the NHL, and all of the things I think that I mentioned about the team having gone from such a disappointing loss 2 seasons ago to winning back-to-back cups, it only speaks to how good Cooper is as a head coach, and there's no reason to think that his window or the Lightning's window necessarily is closing anytime soon. So
yeah, that's what's scary about Tampa is Vasilevsky's 26. I also want to note that I think if Blues fans are listening right now, whatever we think of Jordan Binnington, who's 27. We all think of him as what Andre Vasilevsky actually is, and that's a goalie who can just completely put you on his back as he did in Game 2. Vasilevsky's the real deal. We've obviously seen Binnington play well and win a cup, but Vasilevsky's a whole different level, and he's young. Kucherov's young, Point's young. Even Stamkos feels old, but he's only 31. This team is very much set up to continue success for the next 3 to 5 years, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, really quickly, one more question on hockey. We're not going to go into a ton of detail, but there was news of a couple of stories over the last couple of days. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins signed an 8-year, $41 million deal to stay with the Oilers. And then yesterday there was a big trade with the Kings and the Predators where the Predators ended up trading away Victor Arvidsson. The Kings ended up sending a second and a third back. Just really quickly, do you think that one deal looks better to you over the other? Do you want to weigh in on both? Just quickly jump in and weigh in on Nugent-Hopkins, Arvidsson to the Kings. What do you think about the two moves?
I think Nuge is overpaid, just generally speaking. But I think for what the market bears in the league right now, it's pretty on par with other similarly, talented guys, other tenured guys. I don't know. The Oilers to me have a history of making poor decisions with personnel as far as contracts and picks and things of that nature. So it's hard you kind of have to put it in a different context than just the Oilers making this signing. But I don't think it's any better really or worse than the trade. I think Arvidsson, it's hard to say if Arvidsson's going to see success with the Kings. The Kings are, I don't know, they're kind of like just the old struggling behemoth that's kind of struggling to keep its rear end up anymore, sort of like the Blackhawks have been. But new town, new look for Arvidsson, who maybe he has some sort of like rebound. Certainly was disappointing in Nashville where they weren't able to really win anything except for like best collection of meaningless banners or something. They probably have a banner for that. The difference between sending picks and getting a player in return, I don't think makes any difference for the Predators. But anymore, I think it's just sort of getting a guy who's been around the league, moving to another team within within the same conference, if you will. It just doesn't light up any major buttons for me.
Greg, Dan, you guys want to jump in on either Nugent-Hopkins or the Arvidsson trade?
I don't think Nugent-Hopkins is way overpaid. I think he might be a little bit overpaid. My problem is with the length of the contract. 8 years. I think the NHL needs to crack down and top it off at 4 or 5. I don't know why I think this, but the more time just seems to either really hinder a team or really hinder a player, and it doesn't actually work out good in the end. And as for a Nashville player going to the Kings, my favorite Nashville player last year was their third string goalie, Kazimierz Kastesuo, because of his YouTube videos. If anybody hasn't seen him, please watch him. He is great. But other than that, I don't care about the Predators or the Kings. I think it's a lateral move for both teams.
And Greg, where do you stand on everything?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Dan. I think all sports should cap the length of contracts, personally. But and I don't know why teams don't want to do that, because they never seem to, with rare exceptions, these long deals never really seem to end well. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. I think Nugent-Hopkins is maybe they think he's the type of guy that Well, I guess he wouldn't even be on a line with McDavid, would he? I guess they think he compliments McDavid a little bit. I don't know. I don't know what. I've never been a real big fan of the guy. I don't know what they see in him, or I don't think he's going to take him to the next level. But I guess he got basically what the market will bear. So
yeah,
can't really complain about it.
In terms of Nugent Hopkins, if you look at his annual contract value, it's actually less than his last contract. He was making $6 million a year, and now he's only making 5.15. So they actually got him on a discount compared to his previous contract. So I actually think it's a pretty decent move for Edmonton. He's still at an age where 8 years, I don't feel like the way he plays is going to diminish greatly over those 8 years. He's not known for like being an incredible speed guy like Connor. I think he's just kind of, we know what he is. He's going to stay the way he is. I think he's kind of a glue piece for that team because he does a lot of the dirty stuff on the penalty kill. He can play up the middle. He's good on faceoffs. I think Nugent Hopkins is actually a pretty decent piece for them to continually build around on that second line. So I actually don't mind the move. And I think if I'm Nugent Hopkins, I take the 8 years. I'm sure he signed that deal as quick as it came across because securing yourself for 8 years is smart for him, especially knowing he's going to be playing with McDavid on a team for a while. And then I'm always happy to see the Predators lose a talented player because I hate the Predators so much. So I'm very happy that Arvidsson's somewhere where I don't have to hate him as much as I did being a Predator. I think what's interesting about the Kings is I was looking at their salary cap. They've still got $15 million in space, even though they've got the Drew Doughty deal and they've got Jonathan Quick on a big deal and Kopitar's on a big deal. They've actually still got a lot of space to sign somebody. So I would say look out for LA. If a free agent's out there, LA is a market that obviously will attract a player with the weather and things out in California. So I think the Kings might not be completely done at this point, and adding a guy who has scored 30 goals in his career a couple of times in Arvidsson's a smart move for them. So I like the deal from the LA side. I think Nashville is just committed fully to rebuilding, which is finally the smart decision there in Nashville. But I don't think a second and a third rounder really does much. I thought he would have commanded more than a second and a third for a guy who's proven 30-goal scorer. I guess not. So time will tell on that one. But I like the move for the Kings. Okay, switching over to another story that's probably the biggest story, at least of the morning today. I don't know if any of you guys saw it last night, but major news broke relating to one of the stars of the U.S. Olympic trials. That is track and field athlete Sha'Carri Richardson. So Richardson won the 100-meter race a couple weeks ago, but it was announced yesterday that she tested positive for marijuana. She's since gotten a 30-day suspension, meaning that she's not going to be competing at the Tokyo Olympics. All of her scores in the trials were removed. It's kind of immediate news right now, but I just want to get your thoughts on the situation. Do you agree with the decision by the Olympic Committee? Do you think she should still be going? How do you feel about the whole situation regarding Richardson?
Well, Andrew, if I can jump in,
yeah, please.
I believe she is still going. She's just kicked out of the 100 meters. She can still do the relays the way the calendar lies. That's
correct.
What I read this morning. So she has a 30-day suspension. So she's still on the. Or did they kick her off the team after the thing?
She's still technically allowed to do the relay. However, there's a possibility maybe she gets tested again and it's still in her system, and then it moves that 30 days back. So it's not definitive that she's going to Tokyo yet. There's still time to decide that. But as of the moment, she's still on the relay team.
All right. Well, I just think it's kind of in 2021. I don't know. I think it's kind of dumb to penalize somebody for marijuana, but I guess that's my own personal belief, and technically it is probably an illegal substance. So I just don't see how anybody could consider it a performance enhancing drug. So,
but maybe in the food eating competitive world,
yeah, like.
Isn't the hot dog contest this weekend, I think?
Yeah, Joey Chestnut.
Maybe they should test him. He probably smokes a couple joints before he gets out there and just puts away 80 hot dogs or whatever. But I guess technically it's illegal, and she broke the rules. So, and she seemed to be accepting of it. So.
Yeah, Dan, Sean, do you guys want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think that I agree with Greg that, today it seems frivolous almost to worry about it, as a sporting body, to worry about whether or not one of the athletes has, some compounds associated with marijuana in their system. It's certainly not a performance enhancing in any way, or we couldn't go back to the entire federal ruling on being a Schedule 1 drug, the same as heroin. It's kind of ridiculous, and ultimately I think in this situation it's okay. Yeah, it was a compound found in the marijuana, so something about it that relates to the rules, the doping rules. So she broke the rule and they found this substance that is illegal, then I don't have a problem with the suspension, really. But I think the blowback from it, the negative connotations that are associated with it are very unfair. And you have a person sort of expressing the fact that they're a human being and they do some things and maybe they make bad choices. Maybe it was a bad choice for her. She's dealing with, I think, the loss of her mother. But again, if it's a rule and it's broken, then you have to accept the penalty, which I think she is. But like I said, I think it's the extra stuff that will come from it for her personally, potentially. I hope not. But it seems a bit frivolous to me. Like you got other things you could worry about, and I hope that everything works out and she is able to serve the 30 days and come back and compete in the relay. I know that Team USA hadn't made any announcements about what her status would be for that yet. I hope she gets to run, and I hope that things change moving forward so we don't have to see this kind of thing that just, to me, is kind of a waste of time for the athletes and for the governing body. Like I said, there's probably bigger fish to fry, and let's focus on the achievements and the talent and get on with the sports.
Yeah, Dan, do you want to jump in on this real quick too?
Yeah, I just, once again, I don't see why marijuana is illegal. I will say that. Number two, I don't see why they, in the recent years here, their test went from 15 nanograms to 150 nanograms. Once again, I think that's stupid. I think we got other things to worry about with our athletes. I see a problem with all the alcohol that flows during those weeks. Apparently it's a huge amount, and not to mention, it's weird to talk about on a sports thing, but all the condoms that they go through, and we're worried about, somebody who tested positive for marijuana. I just think it's stupid. But like both of them have said, in the long run, it comes down to her. She knows the rules. Everybody, all of them should know the rules as an Olympic athlete. So it ends up on her. So
yeah, I want a quote from her this morning. She's been on a bunch of news programs this morning. The quote that she said was, "I know what I did. I know what I'm supposed to do. I made the decision." So I appreciate that it's also rare for an athlete that gets caught with anything to admit to it readily, right away. Look at Lance Armstrong and a litany of others who will deny it and boldface lie for years about it. I appreciate that she had the poise, even at 21. I mean, I remember how I was at 21. I mean, she showed an extreme maturity after the incident this morning and last night, even to admit to it and accept the situation and not, throw a fuss about it. I agree with all three of you guys that I think it's ridiculous that it is one of those drugs that they are testing Olympic athletes for in terms of performance enhancers. However, I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, Dan, and certainly after spending some time with Deanna Price, another Olympian who's going to be going in Tokyo, I know how much care and how much meticulous thought process goes through everything she puts in her body. She has to pay attention to every line on every ingredient on every product, and she gets tested so frequently that it's not like it just blindsided her. And so Sha'Carri knew that this was going to be an issue. I mean, and if she didn't, it's unfortunate, and she probably doesn't have the right people around her to advise her of these things going into such an important event. But she, it's a rule. It is what it is, whether we like it or not. It is, it is in the rule book. She violated it. It's unfortunate. I think the punishment based on the rule should be enforced. I hate that I have to say that, but I think that's just the way it is. Hopefully this will allow the Olympic Committee and governing bodies to revisit it and fix it going forward. I saw her this morning. She said she's only 21. She guarantees that in 4 more years, or 3 more years, I guess, she's going to be back in the Olympics. She's going to win the world record. So she's already kind of put a positive spin on it in her own light, and I wish her the best, and I think she's going to grow from it. It's just a shame because out of the trials, she was probably the athlete that got the most attention with, the hair, the nails, the attitude, everything about her, people just really gravitated towards. And I think she was going to be one of the faces of Team USA going into the summer, and now she's not going to be there potentially. So it's a little disappointing, from a spectator standpoint, but I wish her the best, and hopefully we get this rule fixed going forward.
Yeah, I saw someone on social media yesterday saying, making jokes about how the marijuana being considered a performance enhancement drug, and saying, that smoking marijuana is not going to make you run faster, not even to the fridge.
Yeah, it's as a fan of mixed martial arts, this is something that's been in mixed martial arts for the better part of 10 or 15 years now. So I've seen the evolution of these professional fighters having fights, testing positive for marijuana, getting suspended for years. I mean, they were suspending people for multiple years at one point. And now these athletes who have medicinal cards and clear are in states that it's legalized. They don't have to worry about it anymore. And so I've seen the progression in mixed martial arts to where we're at now. And I hope the Olympics maybe looks at some of these other sports and sees the trends and the evolution and follows that direction. So I'm sure we'll have more to talk about with the Olympics over the next month.
All sports are going to have to deal with this. The NFL players want to be able to use it instead of, pain
opioids.
pills.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And Dan, there'll be no condoms this year due to coronavirus. So.
Oh.
I did read that the other day.
I just missed that in the headlines, I guess. Okay. Okay. Let's switch over to a few more sports before we finish. Next up, we've got Euro 2020. We're into the quarterfinals. Actually, as of right now in our recording, there's a match happening between Switzerland and Spain. Dan, you're probably the biggest soccer guy alongside myself. So we don't have to break each match down, line by line. But if you kind of had your picks for the quarterfinals, maybe into the semifinals, when we get around to next week's episode, we'll have the final match so we can talk about that final on next Sunday. But just for the quarterfinals and the semis, do you want to throw out some picks and predictions you've got?
Yeah, real quick, I'll go with. I still think Switzerland has a chance on this one. I don't. I'm sure what the exact score is, but Spain is a good team. I like Belgium. I like De Bruyne and Hazard. I think they're gonna just lift their team up. As far as the Czech Republic and Denmark, I didn't think the Czechs would be here, and even though I said they might be. But that one, I'm going to call a coin flip on that one. I will go with Denmark over Czech Republic, but I still think it's coin flip. And then England is I think pretty easily going to beat Ukraine. From what I've seen in the tournament so far, England has the best defense, and I think defense is actually going to win this year. Not necessarily put them on the board, but with so many goals that have been scored, England's the only one that seems to be shutting some of these forward lines down.
Greg, do you want to get in with any picks? I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to go on record, I'll let you.
No, I haven't been paying close enough attention to make an intelligent pick. So
okay, I'll throw mine in real quick. So Obviously, the Spain game's going on right now. I've got Spain coming through that. I had them going through before the match started. I think that the nice thing for Spain is usually they're one of those like top 2 or 3 teams that everyone looks at and says they're going to be the champion of this tournament. They've actually been under the radar this year because they're in a state of transition where there's some young and some old, and people don't know if this team's that good. So I think it's to Spain's benefit that they haven't really been focused on up to this point. That'll change, obviously, if they make the semifinals. I've got Spain winning today. You've got Belgium and Italy later today. That's the match of the tournament from this point on, potentially. Dan, I wish I could feel as confident about Belgium, but there's rumors that Kevin De Bruyne is not playing today through injury. Can they sustain a win without their best player in the middle of the pitch? I don't know. Italy's kind of a young, exciting team. I think I'm going to pick Belgium, but I think it's going to be one of those games that goes into extra time and maybe even gets decided on penalties, a kick here or there. So I'm going to pick Belgium tentatively. Denmark is the feel-good story of the tournament. Obviously, the Christian Eriksen thing puts a whole different spin on people supporting Denmark. I like them to go through over the Czechs. The Czechs are the lowest-ranked team left in the tournament right now. I think the Danes have enough to get through. I'd like to see them make a run maybe to the final. I think that'd be really cool to see. The most lopsided match is actually England and Ukraine, but I think it could be the most interesting because England fans are such a hot and cold fan base where there's a lot of times where England fans they don't want to buy into their team, and then with one victory they suddenly go from thinking, oh well, it's coming home, we're going to win it now. So after the last round against Germany, England just felt like they're going to ride it out and win the whole tournament. Well, don't sleep on Ukraine because they've proven they're tough. They've got a good manager, Andrei Shevchenko, who's a former player. They know what England's going to bring. I think that this is a potential for a slip-up because England's already looking to the semis and the final. I think that Ukraine's going to be very tough to beat. I'm picking England, but I think it's going to be one of those kind of nerve-wracking moments. Then I'll also mention, if England gets through tomorrow, the semifinals and the final are both at Wembley Stadium in London. So that does give England a pretty big advantage after this round. So if England does get through the Ukraine, there's a very good opportunity they're going to have an intense home support since people can't travel from country to country. So it'll be entirely English fans at the semis and the final. So I like England, but I don't want to put all my eggs in their basket yet. Sean, you want to get some picks in as well?
Yeah, I think I'm sticking with Spain as my dark horse. If they hold on to win this match today, I think they line up pretty well. But I will also say that if Italy finds some way to pull out a win against Belgium today, that they will win the Euro this year, Italy. And I would also take Denmark and England to move on. I think it sets up a really strong, kind of regardless of who we see come through. Like you said, you don't want to sleep on Ukraine, and if Ukraine gets through England, it's kind of anybody's game almost. But there's a lot of good football still to play. I think we're going to see. I totally agree. Belgium, Italy is probably the biggest match, maybe until we get to the final game. As far as two really strong opponents going at each other, but I'm hoping to make time to watch the rest of the games. It should be really, really fun to watch.
And you'd be hard-pressed to get anybody, even who's a diehard football fan, to have picked these 8 teams to be standing. All 3 teams out of the group of death, France, Germany, and Portugal. All 3 of them are out after the last round. It's kind of a free-for-all at this point. And, if we get Ukraine and Denmark or Ukraine and the Czech Republic, no one would have forecast that one. Okay. Dan, you got something else real quick?
Oh, I was just going to say on the last point of this, I wish everybody would would shut up about him. He did not miss that penalty kick. That penalty kick was saved. I hate that they rule that a miss because that was a beautiful save. I mean, to throw your hand up and to block a shot that was kicked so hard and just, punt it out. So that's just what I wanted to say on that.
It is funny seeing a lot of people trashing Mbappe, who's probably the best forward in the world right now. He's only 21 and he's won a World Cup. I don't think he's sweating the miss that much in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, so I'm with you on that.
100% beautiful shot. what you would want your player to place it, how you'd want them to place it, and the goalie just picked right and made a beautiful save.
That's penalty kicks for you, right? I mean, flip of a coin. Okay, switching over to Major League Baseball, we're nearing the All-Star break. When we get around to next week's episode, we'll have some interesting stuff on the All-Star game, the Home Run Derby. However, both leagues have pretty good MVP races heating up right now. So I want to get some opinions from you guys on both. Let's pretend the season ended today and you had to pick an MVP in the AL and the NL. Let's start with the American League. You've got Shohei Ohtani, who's doing things on the mound and at the plate that are kind of things we haven't seen in 100 years in Major League Baseball. And then you've got Vladimir Guerrero Jr., currently on pace to compete in the Triple Crown, batting average, home runs, RBIs. If you had to put your chip on one of these guys to be the MVP today, who do you like? Or maybe you want to throw somebody that's not one of these two, feel free. But who's your AL MVP as of today?
If I had to pick today, I would probably pick Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I really like Ohtani. It's just in baseball today, it's almost mind-boggling to see a guy having such success pitching and hitting. You know, and we've talked at length about the DH argument and about more specifically about pitchers hitting. And this guy is just, you know, a pure athlete who can do pretty much anything. But I think because of how gaudy Vlad Guerrero Jr.'s numbers are, he's probably going to get the nod either way. Ohtani would be a very, you know, non-traditional pick as MVP. I always look at teams and say, well, if you have an MVP playing for a team that's not anywhere even sniffing the playoffs, that doesn't make any sense to me. But I think you can have an outstanding talent who is arguably the most valuable to their team, even though their team is not, you know, has been struggling. But I'd say Guerrero Jr. would get my pick today.
Okay. Greg, Dan, do either of you guys want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think, first of all, I'm glad there's a half a season to go, so this can hopefully get settled, because it's, you know, very tough call. But I think, and I know you're just talking about the American League, but I think in both leagues you've got two guys doing things that, while not unprecedented, haven't been done in a long time. And for the American League, I'm talking about Shohei Ohtani. And a little bit of foreshadowing, I think you've got MVPs that could also be your Cy Young winners, possibly in both leagues. But I go with the kind of unprecedented nature of what Ohtani's doing and give him the edge over Guerrero. But you could always do the Keith Hernandez, Willie Stargell co-MVP cop-out if you wanted to do that. I forget what year that was, but probably before you were born, Andrew. But
I think it was like right as I was born, about 80, somewhere in that 86 to 88 range. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take the opposite approach of Sean. But it's hard to deny what Guerrero's doing. But I just think, you know, Ohtani's doing things we haven't seen since Babe Ruth. So I think he deserves some recognition for that.
Okay, Dan, I'm going to let you split the current tie. Who do you like in the MVP race right now?
I'm going to go with Junior. I'm going to go with Junior on both sides. Like Craig said, we're just about halfway through, so talking about this is a little weird to me. Halfway through the season, but if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to go with Junior and Junior.
Okay. I like what Vlad's doing. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of his dad. I love Vlad Guerrero Sr. I think that Junior's numbers have dipped over the last week. He was leading a couple of categories. He's currently second right now in all three of the Triple Crown categories. I do worry that his numbers, it's so hard to win the Triple Crown in Major League Baseball. It just doesn't happen very often. If he wins the Triple Crown, he wins the MVP, no questions asked. But I don't think he wins the Triple Crown, and I don't think he can win the MVP on one category or even two of them because of the strange uniqueness of this unicorn we have that's Shohei Ohtani. I mean, he's not even that amazing on the pitching mound. Like, he's doing well, but he's only 3-1 with a 3.6 ERA. That's not like Hall of Fame numbers. He's doing well, but it's the fact that he's also leading Major League Baseball in home runs, and he's driving in third most RBIs in the American League. He's still hitting 277. So the fact that he has the capability to do both things just makes it so impressive to me. So I would give Ohtani the edge today, and I think it all comes down to Vlad's Triple Crown chase. If Vlad wins the Triple Crown, it's shut. He wins it. If he doesn't win the Triple Crown, Ohtani's going to win it because of the uniqueness of who he is and what he's doing. So that would be my pick. Switching over to the National League, we've got Fernando Tatis Jr., who Dan seems to think is the favorite right now. He's competing with Jacob deGrom of the New York Mets, who's having a phenomenal season on the pitching mound. Sean, go over to you first. Do you like Tatis Jr.? Do you like deGrom? Maybe somebody off the grid?
I will hopefully step on some toes and say I do not like pitchers winning the MVP award. They have the Cy Young award. I get it. I understand why. And I'll go further to say if Jacob deGrom finishes the season with an ERA under 2, he should probably be the MVP. That doesn't happen anymore, at least not on a regular basis. And if his ERA has been like freakishly good, and it's not like he's coming out of the woodwork somewhere. He's won the Cy Young award twice. So, but I would have to go with Tatis Jr. right now today. Like I said, if things pan out and deGrom finishes the season really strong, as strong as he's been, maybe he gets the nod. But I don't think we should overlook Ronald Acuna Jr. from Atlanta, because he could have been considered for it last year, or maybe it was 2 seasons ago. But he's been consistently, I think, as good as deGrom has been good. And Tatis Jr., this is sort of his coming out party as far as being a superstar in the league. Acuna Jr. has been that since the day he stepped on the field as well. So, and I really like that guy on a team which I love to root against, the Braves. Acuna Jr. has been, one of those guys I find it impossible to root against. So, as the season rolls on and the Padres, remain near the top of the heap, if Tatis Jr. continues to roll like he has, I think he'd probably run away with it. Okay.
And Greg, I think you were maybe teasing that you're leaning towards deGrom earlier, but let's see if that's the case.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. But just because it's like unprecedented. Not unprecedented. I said it wasn't unprecedented before, but you got to go all the way back to probably Gibson to find numbers like that if he can sustain them. But I also think Sean's right. Yeah, I agree with Sean on most years that pitchers have their own thing and don't need to muddy up the MVP waters. But I think when somebody's doing something that dominant and special, that they deserve the extra recognition.
Okay. I will side with Greg on this. I've got deGrom leading my race currently, just because Tatis Jr. is only leading. He's only leading the National League in home runs as opposed to RBIs and average. Those are both a little bit lower. He's 6th in average, 2nd in RBIs. So I think, like Guerrero Jr., he's going to probably win in one of the categories, but not all 3. He's just not quite a Triple Crown level. Whereas deGrom's doing something that I've literally never seen with my eyes the entire time I've existed on Earth. Dating back to when I was born, there's only been 4 pitchers who have won the MVP. That's Kershaw, Verlander, Eckersley, and Clemens. So it's very rare that it happens. However, we've talked about this in past episodes. If you remember, 1968 was the pitcher. Bob Gibson and Denny McClain both won MVP that year, both pitchers. I think this year sets up to almost completely mirror 1968, and we have 2 pitchers win the MVP in Ohtani and deGrom. And people keep telling me that Jacob deGrom is Sandy Koufax reincarnated. Well, Sandy Koufax won the MVP in 1963. He had a 25-5 record and a 1.88 ERA. DeGrom's ERA right now is 0.95, and that's after he got roughed up for 3 runs yesterday and still struck out 14 batters. So I think Jacob DeGrom is doing something that we've literally never seen on the pitching mound to this point, that if he continues at that and probably stays below 1.5 ERA, he's got to be a lock for the MVP because the Mets are first place in the East. That's something to remember. I know that the Padres have a better record technically than the Mets, but they're a better team. If DeGrom and the Mets make the playoffs, he should be the MVP for me. And to completely go against everything I ever say about pitchers at the plate, he's hitting 387 right now at the plate with 6 RBIs. So clap to Dan for always preaching about pitchers hitting. DeGrom's actually crushing it at the plate right now. So I like everything I see from Jacob DeGrom. He's really special to me. So I hope he wins it. Okay, switching over to our last question before we get into our food for thought. We had a listener reach out to us that's kind of a follow-up on last week. So if you remember last week, we gave our top 5 sports cities in North America. We're now going to flip the script and we're going to give our worst 5 sports cities in America. So whether that's determined by the team's success or how you personally feel about the fan base, I want to get each of your opinions on what are the 5 worst sports cities in America. If anybody wants to jump in, feel free to give me your list.
Is there no criteria?
It's whatever it means to you. If it's about team merit or fan base, however you want to rank your 5, give me your 5 worst sports cities.
I think you got to throw Oakland in there, maybe.
Okay.
Just terrible facilities, and I mean they got good fan support, but they've lost. Only St. Louis has lost more NFL teams, I think. So maybe that makes an argument for St. Louis, but I don't think you can put us in the worst. Somebody else want to jump in? I came strong out of the gate, but that's the only one I got.
Feel free if anybody wants to give me their list.
I've got 2, if I remember correctly, that were also on my best sports cities list. That being New York and Chicago.
Okay.
And this is more of a, I think, personal condemnation of the fans than it is any of the sports teams necessarily. We all know that there's been success in Chicago sports. There's been success in New York sports. I would also include in that list Dallas, Philadelphia, and the worst overall by a huge margin, Boston.
Okay.
Yeah, it's I agree with a lot of these actually. I'm gonna say Boston is by far up there. And all of those New England fans and can go to. Let's move on. Another one that I hate, which kind of goes around, is Atlanta. Once again, if we're talking about the actual city, this could be really hard. But when you can throw in the fan base, it's not as hard. I'm going to throw out there San Jose, because I have not been to a Sharks game, but I hear rumors that if you wear anything other than Sharks apparel, then you better be ready for a beer shower, because they don't appreciate that. Other than that, a few like Sean said, I hate New York fans. I hate Chicago fans. Actually, I'm gonna move more towards White Sox fans than Cubbies fans. But let's just use Chicago as a whole. And other than that, really. I know they're good. I know they're going to come back with the Kraken now, but Seattle. For some reason I just don't think that Seattle can sustain a franchise. So those are going to be my picks. I mean,
okay.
I'm
I think
all
you gave
over
me
the
about
board
12
here.
of them, man.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
I was
borrow a
taking
few
note
of
and I
his.
lost it at some point.
Yeah, so did I.
Maybe Greg can borrow a few of your picks.
Yeah, Boston's a good one.
Okay. Greg, I've got you for Boston and Oakland. You want to throw me 3 more that you think are worthy?
Oklahoma City, just because I don't think they should have a team.
They don't even get one? Not even one team?
No, they shouldn't have even one. Buffalo, maybe, for the futility. And what was that, 4?
You got 4.
Can't put Boston on there twice.
Sure.
Hey,
That's
worthy.
That's fair. Yeah. Okay. I'll give you my 5. I'm going to start with the worst. For me, it's clear. Philly. Philly's the worst fan base in America. Whether it's throwing batteries at JD Drew or beating up Santa in the stands, if you're not familiar with that, YouTube that, or having a jail in your NFL stadium. The Philly fans are so violent and so mean to their own players and the opposing players that they're just the worst. Whether it's Flyers fans fighting people in the stands, there's so many things about Philly that make them the worst. So number 1, easy for me. Number 2, this is the only team that made my top 5 list last week, and that's Boston. As much success as Boston has, they have to be on the worst fan base list because the way that they are. If you're familiar with the Celtics, they've had a lot of issues with fans showing up throwing racial slurs out towards African American players. I think Boston's kind of a toxic fan base, so they're on my bad list. Nashville, just because I hate everything about Predators fans. The chance they throw at opposing players and telling them you suck and you're terrible, and the fact that they're kind of a new hockey fan base that likes to pretend that they know a lot, but really those fans just are not very good hockey fans. I hate Nashville. Number 4 is kind of like Boston, and I'm talking about the Utah Jazz fans specifically. If you look up Utah Jazz fans, they're notoriously really rough on African-American players. They throw a lot of racial stuff towards those players. If you Google Utah Jazz fans, you'll see tons of stories from NBA players talking about how terrible they are. And then for me, number 5, they're completely out of the other 4 in terms of the other 4 were really bad fan bases to players. St. Louis has to be on the list, and I know that's controversial because we're in St. Louis, but St. Louis fans are notoriously fair weather. They will show up when things are going well, and when things aren't going well, they don't always necessarily bring the thunder, if you will. And if you name yourself the best fans in baseball, for me, you automatically get discredited because New York fans aren't walking around saying we're the best fans in sports because people just know it. Okay, New York just has a lot of intense sports fans. St. Louis, I feel like we have to pretend that we're the best, or we have to give curtain calls to every player for every double play that gets done because we want to show people that we're the best. But there's something about St. Louis sports fans that bothers me, and that is being a St. Louis sports fan that they have to make the list, even though they're not. We don't taunt people to the degree of these other fan bases, but the pretentious level of St. Louis fans sometimes gets to me. So I will throw that out there and take the heat from it.
I think a little bit of that greatest fans in baseball comes from the 60s and 70s when KMOX was so prevalent, and people in 5 or 6 states around us were listening to Cardinals game and we're Cardinals fans. So I think that's where that stems.
It just feels like it's taken on a whole new thing over the last 20 years or so, where there's a certain subsection of Cardinals fans that like to kind of consider them holier than thou, if you will, and those fans specifically bother me.
Pompous. We use pompous.
I think that gets played up a lot by national media outlets too. You have baseball games on national TV, and you constantly would hear the announcers talking about how St. Louis baseball fans are. They just know their baseball. They know the game, and so it sort of as a self-fulfilling prophecy where you have some of these fans who are just like, no matter what happens or what you say, they can tell you actually it should have been this, or really this is what they should have done, and second guessing everyone else in the universe because they know the answer, and that definitely rubs me the wrong way too. So I fully respect the inclusion of St. Louis in that list. Just to sort of piggyback on that before we get going here, there was another fight between at a Suns Clippers game. At the last game, it happened. Looks like mostly Clippers fans fighting, but there was a fight earlier in that series, I believe, where there were fans fighting in the stands, and it's just LA fans, I think, could possibly be included in that as well, but no one present company not included, of course.
Yeah. Well, LA fans, I'm a Lakers fan, obviously, but LA fans are notoriously late to events. But I think that's also because the traffic there is god awful. And that's, it's hard to get to games. And there's lots to do in LA. You got surfing and Hollywood and all the fun stuff. So, okay, we're going to get to our last segment of the week, which is our food for thought. I know Greg has a good food for thought, and I think Dan's got something in the works too. So I'm going to go over to Greg first, and then Dan, Sean, if you guys have a food for thought, feel free to weigh in afterwards. Greg, over to you.
Yeah, it's the Major League Baseball driving me nuts with the time of game sort of. They're trying all these stupid things to try to, speed up the game, and ironically, it's just making them longer. I saw a stat. The reason I brought this up was I saw a stat that, like, if you go back to the 60s, the game is like an hour and a half longer, the average game, or at least an hour. I can't remember exactly. And, I think they're attacking the problem wrong. If the game was a little more exciting, I don't think people would care how long a game took. The problem is it's boring. It's not how long it is, it's boring. And they need to make it more exciting.
Okay. Maybe we need to adopt one of Sean's rules about you only get so many pitches regardless. I like that.
Well,
we're still fermenting that idea and trying to see what comes out.
I'm playing with another idea. The other night the Cardinals had 7 pitching changes, and they got the 3-batter minimum and all that. I think you should only get. I haven't figured this out exactly yet, but I think you should only get. You can have unlimited changes if they start the inning. From the top of the inning, but you only get 2 non-top of the inning pitching changes per game.
Okay.
I think that would help. That would cut down the number of interruptions in the game.
Okay.
They bring in a guy to face. Well, they can't bring a guy in to face one batter anymore, but that used to drive me crazy too.
Yeah, I feel
Anyway.
like Major League Baseball, no matter what they do, they're always going to get caught in a trap with some section of Major League Baseball fans. Like, people are not going to be happy with changes no matter what, versus people who just think they make too many changes. I think it's a hard one to figure out for them. But I do agree with you that I think pace of play isn't necessarily correlating to length of game. Like we could still have 3-hour games that had more action to them, and people would watch them more than they are now.
Well, the average college football game is like 4 hours long, and people will sit there and watch that whole thing and not complain. And
Exactly.
It's all the, kids stepping out of the box and redoing your batting gloves every pitch. And I don't know. It is a hard problem to solve, but.
Okay, well, I'm going to go over to Dan now because, Dan, you really caught my attention because you wanted to talk about combat sports, which I know is not your area of expertise. So I'm eager to hear what you have to say about a particular boxing match, I believe.
I'm so mad. Everybody put so much energy in this Mayweather other guy fight. I'm not even going to mention other guy because he's not even worth it. He's a piece of garbage. But now I'm finding that Mayweather's a piece of garbage too. To put all this on to make $100 million to scam everybody out of money, it's just a travesty. And And what I really think it does is just really hurt the boxing world, which the boxing world for the past 10 or 15 years has been hurting anyway, with not as much coverage as it once had, or whatever you want to call it. But just to see that, just for them to come out and basically say that he ripped everybody off and he's proud of doing it. It's just a travesty, and I know I wouldn't be able to punch the guy in the head before he punched me in the head, but I sure as heck would like to try. Just because you're a piece of garbage. So hopefully you can clip that. Clip that out for another one. Let me go with one more time. Mayweather, you're a piece of garbage. And other guy, you're definitely a piece of garbage. You and your brother are just garbage bound. So I'm done now. Thank you for your time.
I'll weigh in that if you didn't already have a poor opinion of Floyd Mayweather, look into his track record, because he has a ton of domestic violence situations on his hands year over year. So Floyd Mayweather has never been a particularly good guy. So I would caution anyone that thinks of Mayweather in some high esteem. He's not a great person necessarily. However, I will say anyone who wasted the $50 on the fight and has only since found out that it was a scam, or that it wasn't what they thought it was going to be, you only have yourself to blame, because Mayweather came out in the promotion of the fight and said, this is legalized bank robbing, what I'm about to do. There was never going to be a winner. It was announced as an exhibition. Rumors came out that the night before the fight, they talked about they had to go so many rounds contractually to make a certain number of dollars from the contract. And at one point, you can even see Mayweather basically knocked Logan Paul out. And as Logan Paul was falling forward, Mayweather caught him and basically kept him up to prevent the fight from ending. And there's actually some audio you can find in between rounds where at one point Logan Paul tells the guy, "Hey man, chill. This is just an exhibition fight." So anyone who thought that it was going to be something other than what it was, I don't know what to tell you. It wasn't a sanctioned boxing match for that particular reason. But I will say, as a defender of combat sports, I don't think it necessarily hurt the product, because, as I've talked about in the past, it's going to allow other fighters to see the amount of money that can still be made in combat sports. And those people need to find out what Mayweather and Paul did do right in terms of attracting attention, whether that's personality, promotion, and hone in on that and bring that to the professional side of things, because there is a lot of good professional boxing and professional mixed martial arts out there. The people just aren't doing enough to promote themselves the way Paul and Mayweather have. So I don't think it's inherently evil, even though it's really stupid. I will admit that I would never waste money on such a fight. But yeah, I mean, it was a scam, and anyone surprised by it, I don't know what to tell them. So I'm with you, Dan, that Mayweather's not one to be revered by the sports world for sure. Okay, Sean, I don't know if you have a food for thought. I don't want to go away from you if you've got one, so I want to give you a moment. We've got you on mute at the moment, Sean.
Quick shout out to the newest Cardinal this year, Nolan Arenado, chosen as the All-Star third baseman starter for the National League, as the Major League Baseball All-Star Game is held in Denver, where he has played most of his career and is a fan favorite still. He got a super nice ovation in the game last night, and I think it's just really cool to see him be able to be an All-Star in Denver. And a middle finger to the Colorado organization's leaders. I think most of their fan base would agree has royally screwed up that franchise over the last few seasons at least, and thought it was really cool to see him make the starting roster.
Yeah, and there's a really good chance we're going to be talking about Arenado next week during our baseball segment around the All-Star game, because Arenado's been asked to compete in the home run contest. He hasn't made a decision as far as I last saw. If we do get to the point of him being in the home run contest, I want to get your opinions on if you like the idea of him competing in that. We can revisit that next week, but yeah, that's really cool to see him make that All-Star game. I'll just quickly throw in one final piece, which is we talked about it last week, the Olympic trials. We have a couple of St. Louis athletes who were in the hammer throw that I want to give them both a quick shout out. First one being Deanna Price, who obviously we have a close connection to. She came on our show, did a really cool episode with us. She's number 1 ranked in the world. She's the favorite going into Tokyo to win the gold medal. She became only the second woman ever to throw a hammer over 80 meters during the trials, actually broke 3 American records consecutively in the trials. Really cool to see what she's doing. If she goes on to win a gold medal, I think there's a very good chance she's promised us a sequel episode. So hopefully we'll be talking to her sometime maybe in the fall or winter about her gold medal winning opportunity in Tokyo. The other hammer thrower is Gwen Berry. Gwen's been pretty prominent in the news this week. She's from the Ferguson-Florissant area. She finished 3rd in the hammer throw. Obviously, there's been a lot of controversy around Gwen after the trials when they were standing up. They had the national anthem, and she turned away from the anthem. And a certain section of American media and global media attacked her for being anti-American, anti-flag, saying she should be kicked off the team. I just want to quickly say that to defend Gwen, she did say that it was a setup. They have a particular time every day that they play the national anthem. It's not played at the end of every trial. So they specifically played it at the end of that trial, even though it was a different time that they had done all trial. And she felt that it was a setup because everyone knows how much of an activist she is, and they wanted to have a moment where she took a stance, and she was really offended by that. So I want to defend Gwen and say I believe that is the case, that she was set up to look a certain way. I support athletes taking a stand, whether it's during the anthem or at any other point. That's been happening for 100 years in the Olympics. Go back to the 30s and many different track and field athletes holding up the fist during the anthem, or Jesse Owens winning in Nazi Germany. There's been a lot of political stances taken over the Olympic history, and I also, they're trying to create a rift between Deanna and Gwen, who actually went to college together, and they're friends. And Deanna has said she supports Gwen taking whatever stance she wants. So I appreciate the fact that these two athletes who have different opinions and different views ultimately say we support each other. You do you, I'll do me. I want to wish them both the best of luck, because we could have two Olympic medalists in the hammer throw from the St. Louis area, and that would be really cool to see.
Yeah, there's never been a more misunderstood protest anyway than people, back to Kaepernick or Gwen, it just triggers a certain element, and it's, there's just so much more nuance to what they're doing than what is portrayed in the media. So.
Absolutely, and I've seen a lot of images of Gwen cut out from the picture and photo cropped, and it's just Deanna and the woman who came in second, I believe Brooke Anderson. And just know, if you're listening, those women don't want to have Gwen excluded from those pictures. They're all together on Team USA. They're all friends. They've all competed with each other. Just because they don't all take the same stance or do the exact same thing during the anthem doesn't mean they all don't support each other and having the opportunity to do what you want to do. Because that's what makes the U.S. great, is freedom to do that kind of stuff. So, wish them both luck. That's going to do it for this week. We appreciate you spending some time with us. Be sure to subscribe to our channel on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us at stlbreak.com, and we'll be back again next week.